From Transport Topics in Washington, D.C., this is RoadSigns. Here is your host, Seth Clevenger.
Thank you for listening to RoadSigns, the podcast series from Transport Topics that explores the trends and technologies that are shaping the future of trucking. In this episode, we're going to review the transportation tech that was on display at CES 2025, the world's largest showcase of emerging technologies. Mixed in with all the consumer electronics, artificial intelligence, and robotics demonstrations, CES has also become a major venue for automotive and commercial vehicle technologies over the years. But what do these exhibits reveal about the future of trucking? We'll set out to answer that question in this episode. Now, to help me break down the industry news from CES, I'm happy to bring in my colleague at Transport Topics, staff reporter Connor Wolf. Welcome to the podcast, Connor.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be on.
So back in early January, we both had the opportunity to attend CES in person and explore the exhibits at the Las Vegas Convention Center. Now that we've had some time to digest everything that we saw and look back, what were some of your top takeaways from the show this year, Connor?
Great show this year overall, though I will say kind of on the most surface level, perhaps a little bit slower than past years. And I think that's just kind of reflective of kind of what we see across the trucking market, just with people kind of waiting for the upturn, people kind of trying to reassess the environment. But the usual suspects you would suspect in terms of leading technologies was definitely represented at CES. You had the autonomous trucks. Obviously, EVs are still very popular. I would just say, like, perhaps this year, maybe more than my first 2 years, there was a little bit of maybe not so much a reassessment, but kind of a looking and trying to plan this and trying to actually see where the commercial applications are, trying to see where this stuff is actually practical, what lanes they're practical in, what the applications are. There wasn't so much maybe like futuristic outlooks and really pie in the sky stuff that maybe I saw more so in previous years. It seemed a little bit more down to earth, but there's still definitely a lot of excitement around this stuff. And that was kind of my big takeaway. It's this stuff is very important. It's obviously going to be on this display floor, but there's still a lot of stuff to figure out. There's still a lot of obstacles in terms of full commercialization. And also another big important aspect of all this is CES is not a trucking focused show. So in terms of big announcements and stuff like that, you're probably going to be more likely to see that at ATA, at ACT, at MCNE, at Munich, those type of conferences. That's where you're going to see the big announcements. Here, we're getting some necessary and kind of procedural updates on how things are going, where the obstacles are, and what still needs to be worked out. When it comes to autonomous specifically, we can talk about all the advances in the world, but that first 95% of efficiency and optimization stuff when it comes to those AI systems are usually the easiest part. The reason it seems like there was so much progress on autonomous maybe a few years ago, and that has kind of slowed, is just because that the little details to get into that last 5% of efficiency, last 5% of optimization for the AI systems is much harder than the other 95% because you're trying to compensate for basically every potential unforeseen obstacle out on the road. So there's big obstacles to work through, but I'd say we're still moving pretty quickly in a direction of increased efficiency, increased green energy solutions, and just increased profitability, hopefully, through the efficiency initiatives.
Yeah, for sure. I say that the general themes that you expect to see at a show like CES did remain the same. It is a showcase for automated driving technology. So a couple self-driving truck developers had a prominent presence at CES again this year, and that's been the case for several years now. Also, I would say to a lesser extent than previous years, EVs, electric vehicles, zero-emission truck technologies. We'll dive into that a little bit more later, but I would say that those were probably the two main trends. Also a lot of focus, both in the automotive and commercial vehicle space, on software-defined vehicles. We'll spend some time on that as well. But I agree with your assessment overall that There was a little bit of a pullback in terms of commercial vehicle technology at CES this year compared to prior years. The last several years, it has become a pretty significant venue for medium duty and heavy duty trucks and technology, sort of next generation technologies for these vehicles that move freight. But certainly fewer trucks, Class 8 trucks especially, in the convention center and on the plaza right outside of it, than we've seen at past editions of CES. Now, you started the conversation about autonomous truck developers, and I agree. This has shifted from something that several years ago really did feel pretty futuristic. It was a vision for the future with a long way to go, and it certainly has been a long and winding road. This is a very difficult technology to both develop and commercialize, but we've seen a lot of progress, and that really does show up at a show like CES, where you see not just prototypes and demonstrations, but more and more industry partnerships that can really pave the way for commercialization. So that was one of the big stories, I think, coming out of CES this year. One of the developers, Aurora, of course, Aurora has OEM partnerships with both Volvo and PACCAR. And they are collaborating with global automotive supplier Continental to manufacture the components of their autonomous driving system. So Aurora was at the show at the Continental booth out in the plaza in front of the convention hall. And they also announced this year a partnership with chip-making giant NVIDIA, which has got a lot of attention at the show. NVIDIA is going to supply an in-vehicle computing platform that'll be integrated into the Aurora Driver autonomous driving system that Continental plans to mass produce in 2027. So you saw, of course, as part of that exhibit, a Volvo VNL tractor with the Aurora Driver system equipped on the vehicle. Also at CES, Torque Robotics showcased a Freightliner Cascadia model equipped with its own autonomous driving system. That was at an exhibit hosted by Ava. That's a long-range LiDAR supplier that's supplying its sensors to Torque Robotics. So you see these partnerships with sensor developers, sensor suppliers, also manufacturing companies, in-vehicle computing, all these pieces starting to come together, not just startups out there with a dream and some funding, but also working together with these very large established industry suppliers, as well as the truck OEMs, to make this a reality. And you see it's getting closer and closer. It's certainly something that we see now in the near term. And I would also add that there's been, of course, some exits from the field of competition in the world of autonomous vehicle development. A very big one, of course, was Cruise. General Motors announced they're going to wind down that robotaxi business back in December. So that was a blow to autonomous vehicle development. And we've also seen a similar situation in the commercial vehicle space and trucking, where several of these early developers, early startups in the self-driving truck space have also exited the industry, but there are still several companies that are getting closer and closer to that finish line. So we're seeing consolidation, we're seeing kind of a winnowing of the field, but also a more and more realistic pathway toward commercialization. I think it's always important to remember that we're talking really about hub-to-hub operations here, not autonomous trucks going everywhere and doing everything, but handling certain lanes and working in tandem with human-driven trucks, traditional truck drivers and trucks that will almost work as a relay system, where your truck drivers would gradually shift toward more local and regional routes, and at least on these lanes, and then the autonomous trucks handle long haul stretches of the freight movement from point A to point B. That's this concept that is becoming more and more rooted in or getting closer to reality. Connor, anything else that you would add on the state of development for autonomous driving tech, given that was certainly one of the focal points at CES?
Yeah, I think your summary is kind of perfect there. And then on top of that, you definitely, as you mentioned, you see the sensors, you see the LiDARs, you see all the complementary technologies that are also going to be required. What's really happening here is we're seeing a technology with actual commercial viability. Maybe not as much market saturation now, but there's definitely real cargo being moved by autonomous, mostly testing, but still it's real cargo. Um, and I think that the general consensus is this is a real thing that's coming down the road. So you're going to get a lot of investments. You're going to get the companies involved trying to hype up, obviously, because that's just the way it works, trying to hype up the technology as much as possible. You're going to get investors who are very excited about that. And you're going to get those complementary partner companies like the sensors, the LiDARs, and whoever that are trying to make money in this as well. So you have all these different factors, and it kind of gets chaotic and it gets crazy. And you're going to see failures, you're going to see ups and downs, you're going to see successes. And I think when you're this is why, like in our business, it's so important for people like us to kind of have an eye on the larger trends and the larger picture. And yeah, this is exactly what we would expect from any technological developments. It's messy, it's crazy. There's going to be failures, there's going to be successes, but it's all part of the process. I don't think it's too much of a comparison, but just as a point of comparison, maybe up more on the extreme end is the .com bubble. When the internet started becoming a thing, everyone wanted a .com, and that eventually collapsed. But the websites like back then it was more so Yahoo than Google, but the and AOL and eBay, the websites that were really good and had an actual market value were the ones that were successful after the adjustment. I don't think we're going to see a collapse at all. I think it's a very different situation. But in terms of an adjustment, in terms of making sure that the technology, it will eventually get to a place where it's value driven and able to be commercialized. These adjustments are just a part of that. Now compare that to EVs, if I may, for a second. The reason it's different than EVs is because autonomous technology can be split a million different ways, and there's dozens of competitors in that space. But really, at the end of the day, it's just autonomous technology and people trying to figure out how to do that the best. When it comes to EVs, there are fundamentally different technologies it's competing with, like hydrogen fuel cell, with more efficient ICE engines. And just stuff like that. So in terms of like the trend lines, in terms of what we're seeing in each space, both are going through a process of adjustment. Both are moving closer to their commercial value. Both are in a good spot right now, despite the chaoticness, despite the adjustments. But the real difference between autonomous and EV in terms of their technological development is not so much the interest. That's going to fluctuate depending on all these different factors, but more so that it's not the only technology in the space that's looking to make more efficient engines is basically the big thing there. So that's kind of where it kind of breaks down. But I'm optimistic. But as I've said many times before, just have a realistic expectation of how these technologies are going to trend. We're not going to have full saturation of autonomous vehicles tomorrow. EVs are still going to take a long time. We got to make sure that the regulations coming from the government match what the industry can actually do. We have to have buy-ins from stakeholders, not just in the industry, but outside the industry. We have to make sure that we're realistic with how this technology progresses. But with that being said, anyone who kind of looks at the failures that will occur naturally along the way and say, "Oh, this is evidence EV won't work," or "This is evidence autonomous won't work," unless there's a long-term trend that's indicating that, just ignore those people. What's really happening is we're just seeing what we always see when people are really excited with a technology, which is they might get overexcited, but then things will adjust and be commercially viable in the long term.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great summary, and kind of tracks with the typical hype cycle you see for emerging tech, and I think we've certainly seen that both for autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles. And usually once you go through those ups and downs, that's when it starts to really materialize into a really a product that can make a difference in the industry. And I think we're on the cusp of that, really, in both of those areas. I did want to get into another area of focus and another trend at a show like CES, and that's a pretty heavy focus on software-defined vehicles. And of course, software has been deployed on commercial vehicles for many years now. That's not new. But what we're seeing now is the OEMs are increasingly moving toward vehicles that really can be continuously upgraded over time via over-the-air software updates rather than hardware changes. You can kind of think of a vehicle operating much the same as a mobile device, constant updates, improvements, and it's almost like a software operating system for your vehicle. So it is really ingrained in the design of the vehicle, and the software is primarily responsible for managing the functions and features of the vehicle. So that's been an ongoing trend. We're talking about it a bit differently maybe now as this idea of the software-defined vehicle kind of being the extension of connected vehicle technology that we've seen for some time in our industry now, like remote diagnostics and other forms of connected software, and that are more and more common and even standard on commercial vehicles, certainly late model commercial vehicles. But Connor, your thoughts on how you see software and connectivity playing out in the commercial vehicle space moving forward?
I think the big thing, you're completely right that this is an ongoing thing, right? This isn't new by any stretch of the imagination. We've been integrating tech into vehicles and connecting that tech for a while now. What we're seeing now is just a lot of these technologies coming to maturity, but also a lot of new technologies coming from that. And then the third really important thing is how the connected vehicle supports the other technologies we've been talking about, or either altogether or different aspects of that technology can support other technologies. So that's kind of where we're at with that one, where it's making a lot of progress. But it seems like I mentioned that EVs and autonomous are, I have a pretty good confidence that those are to some degree going to be in our future. But for the the connected vehicle stuff, that's even more so in our future. That's in our past. That is just something that almost seems like it has to happen. Now, there is a difference though. So my focus, obviously, and your focus too, is on the trucks. There's a difference between like the passenger cars, because that's going to be more so, they're not going to have the energy obstacles that you would have with the truck. There's a bunch of different things that are just going to be different. For the truck, I think it just makes a lot of sense because, one, you have companies that want to track things. Tracking shipments is definitely just a fixture of the modern supply chain and logistics market. People want to know when their Amazon packages or their AB packages are on the way. That helps being able to track the truck, and connected vehicle software definitely helps with that. But yeah, it just seems like it's such a ingrained part of the way the trucking industry works right now, that it's not surprising just to see all the competition in this space, all the vendors in that space trying to get their technology on the vehicle, and seeing the people trying to connect it all and bring it all together in a workable way. Because that's another thing that's important with all this technology. You can have all the technology in the world on your truck, but it's got to work together is basically a big thing. And it's got to work together in a way that doesn't overwhelm the driver, doesn't overwhelm the back office. It's got to work in a way that's beneficial rather than a hindrance. And so it's no surprise for me that we see so much activity in that space. It just seems like such a natural way for the truck to evolve, basically. And not to mention, I'm more so just focusing right now on kind of the workability of it and the day-to-day operations. But you talk about the long haul drivers and stuff like that. There's even more tech on the trucks because they're pretty much living on the road. So there's a lot there. It's not surprising. It's probably the most it's one of the more viable and just guaranteed technology developments in this space right now. What it actually looks like long term may be up to debate, but I think we're just moving in the direction of connected vehicles, especially for the trucks and then passenger cars. The consumer base seems to really want that, and that's the biggest consideration, whether consumers want it when it comes to the passenger cars.
Yeah, I think that those three, really mega trends that many global manufacturers, vehicle manufacturers, and their suppliers have identified really for the better part of a decade now. Those three being, automated driving, electrification, and connectivity. Connectivity is the one that is furthest along, and also the one that will be, I think, the most ubiquitous. It's just that will be almost. It just seems almost inevitable that the trucks of the future will be more and more connected and more software defined. And this touches everything from fleet management, how you manage the vehicle. It certainly has a huge role in fleet maintenance, given the increased complexity of modern trucks, modern engines, after treatment, emissions technology. Managing those systems as well as possible, maintaining and repairing them, and also handling maintenance proactively rather than reacting to a breakdown. So that's so impactful for the bottom line of trucking companies that, really for the last few years have had, really thin margins and a tough freight market. That maintenance costs are so important. Yeah, so Connor, you and I were on basically separate tracks at CES. I spent most of my time in the West Hall of the Convention Center, which houses most of the automotive and commercial vehicle technologies that are most pertinent to our audience at Transport Topics, as well as some other sites around Las Vegas, so Expo over at the Venetian, for example. But Connor, you attended a whole series of press conferences and press briefings as part of your itinerary, along with some other trade press who were in Las Vegas for CES. Just tell us maybe an overview of some of the announcements and presentations that stood out the most to you during your time at the show.
Yeah, most certainly. One of the kind of pressers I sat on was Clarios, which they do batteries for electric trucks. They had an announcement where they secured their first contract with an OEM to supply supercapacitors. The caveat there is the OEM, they couldn't say the name of the OEM, but they're not a truck manufacturer. However, these supercapacitors are something that could be used for trucks, and that's a customer base that they're looking for. So that was one of the direct announcements I saw that wasn't some procedural update, but an actual announcement. And then Bosch is expanding its wrong way driving tech, which is obviously very important. Bigger range. It will have the ability to notify other drivers on the road that use adaptable connected vehicle tech that there's a driver driving the wrong way. So obviously, big safety benefits there. And then obviously, you covered this more so than I did, but obviously a very good discussion. The Volvo Group keynote speech. That was important. A lot of announcements. Most of it didn't have to do with trucking. It was more general what products and stuff they're working on. But as it came to trucking, they were talking about their vision of having their global truck production, the truck production across the globe be cleaner, safer, and more efficient. And obviously, we've talked earlier about how a lot of these efficiency and greener initiatives go pretty hand in hand. When you're not wasting as much fuel, you tend to save money. So that, like many other companies, Volvo Group is moving in that direction. Volvo Group just happens to be in a really good position to do that. Given their scope, given their resources, given their technology, and how long they've been in this space. So a lot of exciting stuff. Like I mentioned, in terms of like the really big announcements and stuff, you're mostly going to see that at trucking focused shows like ACT or ATA or MC&E. But you do get a couple cool announcements like this, interesting tech that rises up. And then I'd also mentioned on top of that, besides just the process of of looking for announcements, of collecting quotes, of collecting facts, which obviously, as I'm sure none of your listeners will be surprised to hear that is a massive part of our job. But another part of it is just being there in kind of the chaos and the energy and everything. I had during the week I had a lot of off the record coffee and lunch meetings just to talk with people that I email with and catch up with them and see how things are going. We obviously talk trucking and the OEMs and stuff. But we also had conversations that had nothing to do with trucking because it's all about being part of that experience. So CES, yeah, you're not going to get too many major announcements compared to like a ATA, but you're going to get that energy. You're going to see just how things are moving, who's interacting with who's there that you can grab coffee with. And then not so much for me, because obviously my focus is on trucks, but for the different vendors there that work in trucking or adjacent to trucking, the one big benefit of a conference like this is that you're going to meet people outside of trucking that completely, not even the complementary industries, but just people outside of trucking completely that aren't even thinking about trucking. Because like we said before, CES is not a trucking focused show. So one of the other benefits is just meeting people that you might not meet at a trucking focused show. So that's really where my takeaways are. There's obviously the announcements, which I got my ear to the ground about. But for me, really, CES is really a good time just to get on the ground and tackle things and get messy and see what's happening out in the industry and what technology is exciting at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the percentage of technology on display at CES that's directly related to commercial transportation is minuscule, but it's such an enormous show that you still do see, just even that small percentage of the total show is enough to generate some interest, I think, and really encapsulate some of the trends that we're seeing, especially kind of looking to the near term and medium term future. You mentioned the Volvo keynote. I wanted to dig into that a little bit more. I think it was a pretty interesting session. One of the keynote sessions hosted during CES, and Volvo Group, of course, the parent of Volvo Trucks North America and Mack Trucks. The global CEO Martin Lundstedt led that session and really provided an outline for the company's vision, as you put it well, Connor, a cleaner, safer, more productive transportation industry. A lot of that, involves the company's efforts to decarbonize the movement of goods, by introducing zero and low emission vehicle technologies. That's that's in progress today. Volvo and has introduced battery electric trucks in our market already. A growing list of fleet operators are using these vehicles in the field. And the company is also investing in hydrogen fuel cell technology and of course combustion engines powered by renewable fuels. So it's not a single silver bullet. It's a multi-pronged approach to cleaner technology in the coming years and decades. So this is the vision that they see for the future of commercial vehicles. But Lundstedt certainly acknowledged that the pace of adoption for zero emission trucks may rise and fall along with the rhythm of the hype cycle. And we already touched on this a little bit earlier, but we've now gotten past that peak of inflated expectations, right? When EVs are exciting and new, and then you really run into the barriers, the challenges, the costs, the infrastructure. And we're certainly somewhere in that so-called trough of disillusionment right now with EV. But he made the point, and I think it's very relevant to where we are right now. That often this is that stage where companies really refine their strategies, and they start to build that foundation for future success. Where technology that is new, is exciting, also brings about challenges, comes with challenges. You find out what is the right use case, what is the best fit in our industry for this technology, and how can we truly make it work. And a big part of his answer was partnerships, really partnerships among all these different stakeholders, right? Not just startup companies, but also big companies. It's government, together with the private sector. It's truck manufacturers. It's trucking companies, carriers. It's shippers. Even consumers. So it's there's a role in this for everybody, and that was one of my big takeaways from that conversation. And that was probably the most that we heard about electrification at this show. As I think back on it, and you made the point earlier, Connor, that maybe a little bit of a pullback. I mean, certainly fewer battery electric trucks on display on the show floor at CES this year compared to some recent years. And I don't want to read too much into that because a lot of that might just have shifted over to ACT Expo, Advanced Clean Transportation Expo. It's coming up later this year in Anaheim. But certainly there's a shift in the regulatory environment as well, with California in particular. California's Air Resources Board just recently withdrew its Advanced Clean Fleets regulation that would have required trucking companies in the state over time to phase in EVs. There's still regulations in place, though, in terms of the Advanced Clean Trucks rule, which is a sales requirement on the truck OEMs. But certainly the regulatory environment has been, still very much evolving, still very much in flux. We're watching that, and it's still a new segment of the industry that's materializing, but and a lot of interest. But we'll have to watch and see how that plays out over time. One other type of technology, or maybe category, that I also wanted to mention from CES that was interesting to me was driver assist technology. So usually you don't think a whole lot about CES as a prime venue for that. You think of, hey, that's going to be like the cutting edge autonomous vehicle technology, but there's some driver assist tech on display as well. Stone Ridge. So Stone Ridge is a company that supplies the Mirror Eye system. This uses onboard cameras and digital displays in the cab to replace the traditional side mirrors. And the idea there is to eliminate blind spots around the vehicle for the driver and improve visibility, ultimately improve safety, using these digital displays and camera technology. And that vision they showed at CES was 360-degree views around the vehicle. That includes these side cameras, downward-facing cameras. You see the sides of the vehicle had a camera mounted on the front above the grille, so you see right in front of the vehicle as well. And it can also the displays can also tap into cameras potentially on the trailer as well. That could be a cargo camera looking inside the trailer, and also behind the trailer, in the back of the trailer for backing. So there's really some opportunities there, of course, to provide more tools at the driver's disposal to help improve safety and take that to the next level, including pedestrian detection warnings, things like that. So that was really interesting to see, right in the heart of the West Hall at the Las Vegas Convention Center at CES was this driver assist vision system, camera-based vision and visibility system for commercial trucks. One final point I wanted to maybe end this conversation on, of course, is we've alluded to the fact that trucking technology is only one small piece of everything you see at CES. CES is technology for just about every industry you can possibly imagine. And I got a little bit of time to kind of wander the halls and explore other parts, not a whole lot of time, but other parts of CES to see what else was on display. A whole lot of focus on artificial intelligence, certainly a big piece of that. Smart home technology, more and more connected devices. Connor, I don't know how much time you had to really check out other parts of CES. Probably not a whole lot, but what else did you see? What else stood out to you beyond the press conferences and press briefings and panels and the West Hall? What else did you see, and what else did you take in?
Yeah, I did get the chance to go to the main hall or central hall there once and did a nice walk around. Obviously, I wasn't really sitting in on press junkets or anything like that, but Yeah, overall, it's very exciting to see this stuff. I might, outside of work and covering technology because of trucking, I'm a little bit old fashioned when it comes to technology. So when I walk down the hall, I feel like I'm kind of in the future a little bit, where it's like, oh, cool, this is a lot of innovative stuff that I didn't even know existed, and that's part of the fun. The fun of it is like it's like window shopping almost, where you're like, this is really cool stuff, but I'm probably not going to own most of it in my lifetime. It's very for the people who are very into tech and very into little widgets and gadgets and stuff. There's a lot of stuff to get excited about. For me, it's very overwhelming. I feel like I jumped 50 years ahead into the future.
Yeah, it was very exciting to see, and you see people from every industry you can imagine. It's a pretty international show. You see people from all over the globe, but it is interesting to see some of the other exhibits and envision how they might play out in the commercial transportation space as well. I see we've covered a lot of ground here, but before we wrap up, Connor, I would like to just turn to you one last time here to offer any final thoughts you might have for us and might like to share with our listeners.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway is just people recognize that a lot of this has more to do with long-term trends than it does with the ebbs and flows and minutia of the day-to-day operations. You're going to see failures. You're going to see regulations have an impact. You're going to see all this stuff, but really be cautious about writing stuff off or getting too excited about stuff too. Both extremes, and really let the long-term trends dictate what the stuff is and where it's going to be actually useful in the future.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for probably any industry, but certainly ours in transportation as we think about emerging tech and how it could impact the industry. It's coming. Probably is not going to change the whole industry overnight, but most likely it'll have its place as we plan for the future. So thanks again, Connor. I really appreciated your time here, and thank you again for joining the podcast and sharing your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Did you know you can ask Alexa to open Transport Topics? In just 1 minute, you will hear the biggest trucking headlines of that day. Be prepared and start your morning off right with Transport Topics.
We hope you've enjoyed this recap of the commercial vehicle technologies on display at CES 2025. I should mention to our listeners that you can check out our coverage of the show online at ttnews.com. And if you're a Transport Topics subscriber, you can review our complete CES coverage in the January 20th issue of TT. If you're not a subscriber, you can sign up at ttn.ws/ttsubscribe or text TT-subscribe to 571-622-0001. If you've enjoyed this episode of Road Signs, please let others know. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And of course, we'll be back soon with a fresh episode of Road Signs. Until then, I'm Seth Clevenger. Thank you for listening.